The Chicago Bulls currently sit at one of the most difficult places to be in all of sports. That's middle of the pack. Not clearly under 500, not good enough to be high in the lottery, and not good enough to be a high playoff team. The Bulls currently sit at just a place that is kind of sports purgatory in a lot of ways. We're going to take a look at the Bulls' assets and what they could do if they do want to make a trade to improve this team and get out of the middle of the pack area. But we're also going to ask if that answer to getting out of the middle of the pack lays here in the Chicago Bulls roster. We'll get into all that and more on today's Chicago Bulls Central.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
All right, Bulls fans. So we are currently, like I said in the intro, one of the most difficult places to be in sports as a sports franchise and team, and that is the middle of the pack. And as long as the Bulls sit in that area where they're not really bad enough to go full tank, it does not make sense for them to go full tank for reasons outside of just the quality of the roster. They don't own their own destiny by owning their own first round pick outright. So that leaves it this is then if the Bulls aren't bad enough and they aren't going to tank, which they're not, right? We've talked about that here several times, why it does not make sense and why the Bulls will not be going full rebuild as some people have called for them to do. You then have to look at, okay, then what are you going to do on the roster if you do want to improve this season? We know that there's always next season. We'll talk a little bit about why the Chicago Bulls could just wait it out and end up reaping the benefits of a new CBA and TV deal coming up here shortly. But if the Bulls did want to make a move this offseason to go after some of the names that are starting to sound like they are becoming available, could we go after Bogdanovich, right, as they look to possibly move him, and he could bring some of that size and three-point shooting that the Chicago Bulls team does need? Could we go after a player like who's been coming up recently in Kyle Kuzma? We actually talked about that over on Locked on Bulls when I asked Pat if he would be interested in Kyle Kuzma. Should the Chicago Bulls be looking at doing some of those type of trades that maybe PJ Washington, somebody that I've mentioned before, Jay Crowder has been mentioned almost since the season began by most Bulls fans, and bring some improvements to this roster to try to add talent, try to maybe fix some of the imbalance on this roster, and then we can see where we go and then figure out the rest in free agency or more towards the trade deadline. Now, I've been saying for a while here, I don't expect the Chicago Bulls to make a major trade this season, even though I know a lot of Bulls fans want them to. And I do think, we've heard that Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, basically untouchable. We already know that this front office is probably very hesitant and not probably, but they are very hesitant, and they will not trade Patrick Williams. Ayo Dosunmu, another possible trade asset as another young player with a cheap contract, and that's why the Bulls shouldn't move Ayo Dosunmu. The contract is not going to net you back anything, even if you do pair it with a Kobe White, and Ayo's so young, and you still don't know what's going on with Lonzo Ball. So again, this is another asset that I'm marking down as somebody the Bulls are probably not going to trade, right? So that leaves out of that, right? That's most of the Bulls starters there that we're already saying that they're not likely to trade. Ayo Dosunmu off the board. Zach LaVine already been said to be they're not offering him. It's untouchable when it comes to this Chicago Bulls front office. DeMar DeRozan, same. Patrick Williams, we know the feelings there. So that really leaves you as Nikola Vucevic and his expiring contract probably as the biggest trade chip the Chicago Bulls do have. Again, we'll see what you could get back for that, and I still think that it's more likely than not they're going to hold on to Nikola Vucevic, but we can definitely say Vucevic is as a $22 million expiring contract, could be a trade chip. You then start looking towards the bench. Alex Caruso, somebody who, especially contending teams, could very well want, right? A contending team that just needs a little bit of edge going into the playoffs. A team like the Golden State Warriors who lost Gary Payton II. Could they then look at Alex Caruso and say he is a player that we can bring in to bring some defense and really bolster our bench back? Could they end up wanting to make that deal? I'm just throwing them out there. I don't really know. But then again, if you're trading with a team that is playoff contention, right? What of note are they going to be trying to give back if they're going on a championship run, right? I know some Bulls fans will say, well, Wiseman or something. No, they're not going to give up Wiseman for Alex Caruso. But let's mark Alex Caruso down as a possible trade chip. Not a likely one, but a possible one. Kobe White. The same Kobe White that reportedly was shopped this offseason. They couldn't find a deal that they liked for him, but Kobe White this season so far improved defensively, improved playmaking, improved ability to put the ball on the floor. But the one thing that Kobe White, at least coming into this league, that people thought he was going to do was score the ball. He's not been doing consistently this season, but you can definitely throw him in one of the trade assets. Javonte Green, Derrick Jones Jr., both of these guys playing key energy roles for the Chicago Bulls is very well. Again, a team could look at these guys and say, especially with Javonte, let's get him in here. We can get his bird rights. We can re-sign him because Javonte is probably going to try to get the largest contract he can, considering he's already 29, and this will be his first time in real free agency. So looking at those, Andre Drummond, could they look to move Andre Drummond for getting another bench big back? It could be possible. I don't think that it's likely, but it could be possible. That's another trade chip. And then you have Dalen Terry, who the Bulls aren't going to trade Dalen Terry. You got Marko Simonovic, who is a young big that the Bulls just have not developed, and he hasn't developed well. You got Tony Bradley's contract as well. So when you really look at those pieces, right? And the reason why I wanted to do this and talk about this on this video, because so often as Bulls fans, we just, in the conversation, especially when we're not happy with the team, it's just a stream of trade ideas from every direction, and everybody just thinks they have the answer. Also, let's throw in the Portland pick, the possible Portland pick that we could be getting back that is not even necessarily, but if we do get it back, the best that it could be is right outside of the lottery. And the Portland Trail Blazers right now, the 6th seed in the Western Conference. So if the playoffs started today, that pick would convey. So when you look at this Chicago Bulls team, while I know a lot of people do want the Bulls to make a major move because, yeah, the roster's unbalanced. It hasn't quite fit together. The bet on continuity hasn't seemed like it worked up until this point, and we're under 500, so something has to give, right? Or is it more than likely that this team may make a minor move, right? A minor one, like I said, like the Jay Crowder. Kyle Kuzma, I think, would be more of I wouldn't call that necessarily a minor move, but I don't think the Bulls would give up the pieces in the rotation to make it all of a sudden this monster move either. But the Bulls, when going into this and closer to this trade deadline, especially if the team continues to underperform, that's the assets that we're dealing with. That's the assets that we could have a chance to move to try to bring in something better to this roster. And while I know the rebuild conversation is going to continue to happen and nothing can stop it and nothing should stop it unless this team starts freaking winning. This team is more likely than not is just going to chill. Maybe make some incremental improvements. Maybe look at some free agents. I still would love the Chicago Bulls to take a look at Carmelo Anthony. That's just my personal opinion. But the Jay Crowder thing, there are other ideas, PJ Washington, other ideas that are out there for the Chicago Bulls to go after. And make no mistake about it. As this middle of the pack team, where, like I said, this is one of the worst places to be in sports. Right now, other middle of the pack teams, us, you got to throw in the Wizards in there, the Miami Heat, the Toronto Raptors, the Indiana Pacers, the Atlanta Hawks, which aren't really that much, but there's not much that separates those teams. And I think a lot of other GMs and execs are kind of circling, waiting, and everybody's looking at each other like, what's going to be the first team that's in this middle of the pack area that decides to go ahead and pull the trigger to try to do something different? And don't be surprised if you see a lot of middle of the pack teams make different trades that decide to go different directions. There's going to be a couple of those middle of the pack teams in the Eastern Conference that decide, hey, we're gonna trade some talent. We're gonna try to get some picks back so we can get as many bites at the apple in this upcoming draft that a lot of people do like a lot of players in. And the question is where the Bulls are going to be on the side of that. I think they're going to be more on the side of buyers than sellers. But again, when I say that, I don't mean a major move's coming. Now, I do want to talk about this, and it's something I talked about a little bit over on NBA Central, and that is the upcoming new TV deal and the new CBA and a possible hard cap. And I want to talk specifically how that could actually help the Chicago Bulls. And I talked a little bit about it over on NBA Central, but I'm going to flesh it out a little bit more here. And that is this, right? When you hear that the Players Association and the NBA execs right now, the biggest thing that they're apart on is simply just, it seems like the owners want this hard cap and the Players Association is pushing against it. And why I think the Bulls, and I've went into detail on what that means for the NBA over there. So if you want to see that video and have an overall NBA conversation, go over to NBA Central. But here I just want to talk about it from this standpoint, is that if a hard cap is put in place, which I think that if a hard cap is put in place, it's going to basically replace the luxury tax line now, meaning that there's no more penalty, there's no more luxury tax for spending up into that hard cap level. They may work something in for some things that is kind of unforeseen. But if that does happen, teams that are already managing money bigly, like the Chicago Bulls, could benefit hugely from that. You got to think, this is already a team that already does some type of cap maneuvering to avoid the luxury tax. If you avoid the chance of a luxury tax and just put a hard cap in, which again, contrary to some Bulls fans' beliefs or understanding of the cap, the Bulls have been over the salary cap every single year. They just don't pay the luxury tax. So they've treated that luxury tax as basically a hard cap limit anyway. And when you look at the new CBA, that's going to rise that hard cap, if it is one, or even the salary cap, it's going to raise it up exponentially. And then if you look at on top of that, the new TV deal coming in 2024-25 is going to, again, raise the salary cap exponentially. So with the Chicago Bulls, and this is not to excuse AK and Eversley or anything like that. This is not to do that. This is just to identify what could and I hope could come up next if these two moves were to happen. You then would have more spending power already by the nature of the salary cap hitting rises 2 times like that. So you would already get exponentially more money just staying under that luxury tax. But if it then is a hard cap type system, and the Chicago Bulls are already one of the teams that have treated the luxury tax as a hard cap, you got to think about it. All these teams over into the luxury tax are going to have to start selling players. All these other teams that have a lot of these young players that they just have been giving big contracts to because they can go into the luxury tax to sign them. Don't be surprised if in 2024-25, keep in mind, that's the Bulls will have their own pick. I said it before. That's the next time the Bulls can have significant cap money. Even if they do re-sign Io, even if they do give Patrick Williams a sizable extension, by that time, when the new TV deal kicks in, this Chicago Bulls team is right now set up to have about $30 million in cap space. So and that's already with the current projections. Again, keep in mind, there's going to be spikes with the new CBA. There's going to be spikes with the new TV deal. So the Bulls can be even less under the luxury tax. Now, that is a long time to ask fans to wait for this franchise to get legitimate, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that this team doesn't need to make moves between now and then. I'm not saying this team doesn't look to need, and we don't deserve to have an improved team before then. We absolutely do. But what I'm saying, even if this team does improve and goes from being a first-round playoff exit to maybe a team that can get into the second round, maybe, God forbid, win a second-round series, but let's just say we're not quite that championship level team right there. The Bulls are in a unique situation to take advantage of all the teams that are going to have to cut some serious cap with the luxury tax team. Some teams that aren't going to be able to re-sign their own free agents just because there's now a hard cap. The Bulls could look to be the home of some of those players and make a major move at that point. We'll see what happens. And I think it's going to get interesting, too, when you think about also one of the things that was rumored as well is bringing in high school players again into the NBA. So that means that the teams that are going to be pressed to make those hard decisions on extensions could look and say, we're going to have a lot of influx of young talent coming in here in the next couple of years. We may avoid giving that large contract to extension to a rookie that's been good, but hasn't necessarily been great. Right? Or a young player, I shouldn't say a rookie, a younger player. But let me know what you guys think on everything down below. Do you think I'm off my rocker again? And I know that there's going to be some of those comments of, well, Jerry Reinsdorf's cheap to a degree, right? And that's, yes, he still has allowed this team to spend over the salary cap. So if there's a hard cap, at least from what we've seen so far, and it's not penalized like a luxury tax is, we could see the Bulls spin up into that hard cap because we'll see. Let me know what you guys think about everything down below. Make sure you're following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text and or voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related because of you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red. And peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.